Thank you, and welcome, and thanks for coming in out of that beautiful day that we're having. And I hope you have had joy of it, and I hope you will join us for the joy of the 30th annual plant exchange at our house, a gala celebration, the social event of the season. Something you don't want to miss. You are welcome to bring plants anytime that previous week, preferably the Friday or the Saturday, just 2 days before the plant exchange. But if that's not convenient, anytime will do. We welcome the plants. Please be sure that they're properly labeled and properly potted so that if they're not immediately snatched up again, they have still a good chance of survival. And watered, preferably, of course. At least the common name, the botanical name, also helps to identify your plants. And if you're in doubt about anything, please email me or give us a call. And I'd be happy to give you information if you want that. There will be some special events during the plant exchange. A semi-guided tour of our yard at 1:30 and again at 3:30. And we will also have a brief ceremony about 2:30 at our life cairn, which is a stone cairn commemorating, remembering vanished species and consecrating our efforts to preserve other species which are in danger of vanishing. And you're welcome to bring a stone that has some significance for you, a stone from your yard or from some other special place, and add it to the cairn and to say a word about a species that is particularly significant to you or something about the stone. Just keep it brief, but we'd be happy to have your contribution to the ceremony. We've been doing this for over 10 years now, and it was started with a life cairn on Mount Caburn in Sussex, England, and the following few months after that, I did some walking with the co-founder of that original life cairn, Reverend Peter Owen Jones. Probably the coolest Anglican minister in the British Isles. So please come and please feel welcome. And again, let me emphasize, if you don't have a native plant to bring, that's fine. Just come. There'll be lots of food and lots of information exchanged, as well as plants. And all you have to be obliged to do is to take some plants home and cherish them. Ruth and I first encountered Brenna Pixley at an event at Tillers International. And she was going to lead a walk through some of the Tillers grounds and identify some native plants for us on those grounds and talk about their uses, their herbal uses, their uses as food, and food as medicine. And what I particularly remember about that encounter with Brenna was the way she related to the plants as we encountered them and as she talked about them. They seemed very personal friends in a way, relations among all our relations. And I remember the way she showed them the way she touched them, the way she talked about them. Something very special. And later, I saw the same kinds of things in Brenna. She helped us in our yard sometimes. She would bring us sometimes things from her yard, wild leeks, and help to plant them. And it was always for Brenna some kind of very close relationship between herself and the plants. And I also know one of her teachers as an herbalist, Jim McDonald. And some of you may remember him as a several times speaker at the Wildflower Association conferences in Lansing. And I looked up a little bit of Jim's website. And I think that what he expresses here says a lot about him and about Brenna as well. They're very different people. They have very different styles. But I know they have a very close relationship. And Jim says, infuse yourself in plants. And I remember after the walk at Tiller's, Brenna showed us some of her infusions from those plants and gave us a little demonstration about infusion. And it was a demonstration not just of the techniques, it was a demonstration of that little saying from Jim McDonald, infuse yourself in plants. And he goes on to say, I feel the most important offering I can make to the herbs that have taught me so much is for me to teach others to make relationship with the plants that grow around them and receive their own teachings. It is my deepest passion to encourage people to understand the herbs that they share this land with and to integrate that relationship into every aspect of their lives. That connection, I believe, is what makes for a good herbalist. Brenna knows foraging for food and for herbs, food as medicine, and what she and Jim share in their love for plants. When I remember something that George Washington Carver said, if you love something enough, it will talk to you. And the plants talk to Brenna, and Brenna talks to the plants. And that makes for a good herbalist. Please join me in welcoming Brenna.
Thank you, Tom. That was really lovely. And thank you, Tom. That was very lovely. And it's very lovely to see all of your faces here and to help us all create a new and maybe different sort of passion for plants. I did meet Tom and Ruth at Tiller's, and when they asked to teach, or when they asked me to work in their yard, it was one of the greatest privileges I've had as a gardener. Just the collection, just the specimens and the vitality that that space holds. It made a big imprint on me. Thank you for inviting me there. Can I bring this a little closer? I think that's better. I'm Brenna Pixley, and if this presentation is not one that you usually see. I'm a really salt of the earth person, so translating my outdoorsiness onto the computers was difficult for me. So, um, so I'm from Kalamazoo. I have a house in the Vine neighborhood. I have an urban farm there, a small one. I also want to say that this is occupied Potawatomi Ojibwa lands that we live on. I also have a property out in Ashimo that I'm starting to rewild and really need to just rewild that space because it was heavily grazed. So we're all in this together. As Tom said, I studied with Jim McDonald when I was pregnant with my first child. That was 8 years ago. And right after that, I started going to like women's gatherings and seeing what like community can do and how being in space with other people and like the infusion of that knowledge and how like it creates mycelium in all these different pockets and how you can just the internet can reach just the teeny tiny cracks that normally society in your town would never do. So I don't think, there we go. Hello. About gatherings in general. And there's a lot of really cool gatherings that are going on in Michigan. And I would love to tell you about them later on in the presentation. But I also, when I was little, my grandmother was from the Appalachian region, and she never wanted to talk about it. So I always had just like, feel like I was always just following this little thread and trying to unravel my family's history that just wasn't really taught to me. And the Foxfire books, that helped me a lot to connect with that region. I moved out to California and I was feeling like I really wanted to study herbalism. And I said, I don't feel like this is a place that I connect with. And I really want, I think I was looking for an excuse to move back to Michigan, to this beautiful area. So I was like, I just need to be in my bioregion. So when I got back here, I remember taking Jim's classes and telling other students that I was just like, yeah, in California, I just didn't really feel like there was a lot to forage. And I remember he whipped his head back and he gave me a look. And I didn't know what look that meant. But as I started learning plants, I realized that in herbalism, a lot of those plants grow here and there and all over the globe. So we're a global society. So being back here, when I started working at this amazing farm called Butternut Sustainable Farms, and I was asked to go out and collect wood sorrel for this really fancy restaurant called Alinea. It's in Chicago. I don't know if it's really yes. And so I was out just in the sun collecting just tiny oxalic leaves and covering them, running as fast as I could to the house to refrigerate them. And just knowing that like this little leaf that I'm getting, this little weed is being put on maybe the most expensive plate in the United States at the time it felt like such a deep chasm of like what this weed is to what people pay and how everybody is, the string of people is not too far from the fancy diners to the foraging. So with that being said, I kept doing it. I kept eating it. And then I was asked to teach at the Food Innovations campus at KVCC and then Tillers as well. So I've been teaching at both of those places for 7 years. And I have a 6-week course at KVCC that's really fun. And we go heavy on the herbalism. And that being said, I just have been pulled and pulled and pulled more to wild foods. I feel so much more comfortable leading people in the direction of eating wild things and eating what's around them than necessarily trying to extrapolate all of the healing modalities of herbs, because I feel like every single person can benefit from eating wild foods. So let's start. So I want to say that every person in this room all of our ancestors were foragers. And it really hasn't been that many generations back for some people that our lineage was subsistence foraging. And a lot of modern outlook is that, oh, we only had to forage because we were supplementing what we couldn't grow, or like only the paupers forage. And it seems to be now that like it's really a luxury to be able to have the time to spend out of the grocery stores and into the wild to collect our foods. So it's said that there's up to 6,000 to 300,000 edible species, and I don't know that number. The 6,000 seems really small, and I don't really know if that's like a Western outlook on a number count that somebody did, but modern humans are really only consuming about 200 plants, like in their diets, instead of the 6,000 that are edible. So 90% of the modern diet comes from about 30 plants. So when we think about like, oh, I feel like I'm eating a really diverse diet, and I'm eating like cauliflower and broccoli and Brussels sprouts and mustard, but those are actually all the same species. So when it really comes down to numbers, if we're not out there like nibbling the conifers, if we're not out there like tasting things around us, we're not really absorbing that much genetic material from plants. And also half of the calories from across the world come from 3 main plants. So that's corn, rice, and wheat. So I'm sure that's not a surprise to anybody here. And so if you think about evolution as a whole and what hominids did, the most significant change in human history, I'm sure a lot of you know that, is agrarian societies. So that most people agree that's about 20,000 years ago. So if we can think 20,000 years to maybe all of the hominids could be 6 million or more years ago, that's such a small percentage of people that haven't been only eating wild foods. We're not that far of a leap, so we just, redirect to the future. So also humans co-evolved to eat plants. Like you can see in the old hominid skulls how their jaws were way more massive, and that was to like accommodate like massive plant matter. Like if you think of like how pandas just like gnaw on those bamboo. It's like that. And so we've refined it. So this is the Tianshan food forest. Has anybody heard of that here? So this is in British Columbia, and it's in coastal Salish territories, and this has got a lot of coverage in the anthropology department in the recent years. So this plot right here, if you can see the difference in the forest, obviously it's in an amazing location. There's the river here and the forest on the sides. And the area, there's a lot of views online if you want to look it up. But this aerial view really, really just pinpoints how humans have been tending the wild for a long time. So this is probably about 2,000 years worth of continual agriculture here. So it's been 150 years since this has actually been lived in and tended, because the people were forced from their lands 150 years ago. But since then, it has created like a wealth of biodiversity for bears and moose and all the pollinators here. So what they did here, so there's evidence of, and I'm saying this is 2,000 years of ongoing inhabitation of this land. So burning, coppicing, which is like chopping it all the way to the ground and letting it regrow again. They fertilized, they had distance planting, pruning, and weeding. A lot of this style was traced up until about 5,000 years ago, and they know that because of the hazelnuts did not grow anywhere around here. So people had brought the hazelnuts into this territory, and they had cherries and plums and crab apples and rice roots, which don't grow around here, but it's a really cool lily that has the rootlets look just like rice. And wild ginger, soapberry, and medicinal herbs. And we're gonna go over what it looks like to plant a food forest here in this region. Because it's, when you think about like planting things and actually foraging, a lot of that is in the shade. And I feel like that's the biggest hurdle for Native people and people who don't have a lot of land. It's like, I can't grow food in the shade. But traditionally, a lot of it, berries, nuts, all of those things are grown in the shade. So we have some hope. So the easiest way to feel like you're part of a place is to eat it, like hands down. When you go to a new country, like you should eat the yogurt because like you want to grab those those cultures and make your gut more resilient to where you are. And we can do that too. By eating what's around us and not just being a witness, like we are actually sharing genetic material with the land that we're living on. And yes, being a steward of the land is really important, but I feel like, are you really that invested into your landscape if you're not eating off of it? It's pretty, yes. And it gets to the point where this is a Sam Thayer train of thought, but when did all of the white-tailed deer and all of these animals, raccoons, get that much more sacred than humans? Like, we're just so divorced from nature. We are not allowed, they're only allowed the preserves. Only the animals can have the pristine habitats to eat off of. And so we're only left with dirty agricultural systems when they're knowingly poisoning what's in the food system. So eating a little, like I used to be really serious, like, oh, I only go into like 2 miles into the woods to gather my berries. And I was really, really meticulous about it. But now I'm looking at the whole picture and what the food systems are actually giving us versus maybe having some slight like dog and like, from a trailhead. So if we simply just enjoy the beauty, that is really powerful and that is really potent. And we need what we could say in the foraging world, like the bird watcher. Some people want to learn about plants and they just want to bird watch and they just want to see what they're doing. And some people want to get in there and some people want to forage. Sometimes they want to show their grandchildren. They want to show your children. And they like the idea of it. And then some people want to get deeper and deeper and make jams and grab friends' plants and bring them to their yard. And wherever you fall on that spectrum is great. Like, don't feel like you need to compare yourself to the person that's out there like making acorn flour. If you do it one time, that's awesome. It's like a rite of passage, but don't feel like you have to also be burdened by the fact that you're not eating wild. I just want to take that off your shoulders as well too. Because I can come up here and like talk about this till the cows come home, but I don't have that much time to actually forage myself always. So one thing I do is I purchase it from the farmer's market. A little plug for Nabi. She has a lot of wild foods at her stall. So also plants evolved with human predation. It's like if you cut your parsley back. It's like when you cut your kitchen herbs back, they get bushier and bushier and bushier because those plants have evolved a mechanism to create and stimulate growth when they're being predated on. And if you don't eat those plants, they're just going to be stringy and maybe not be as lush as they could be. These things have evolved, and the wild foods have evolved as well. Like if you think about ramps, I don't have a space where I'm going to talk about ramps, but raise hands if anybody's ever eaten ramps or wild leeks here. Has anybody told you you should only eat the leaves? Okay, a few. And how did you feel about that? Did you still eat the roots too? Okay. 90% of the distribution of ramps is listed as least threatened. Like some ideas just catch on and they're spread, but that doesn't honestly mean that they're right or those people are coming from a scientific background. And those people are coming from a background of preservation, and I am all about preservation of some things. But when it comes to things like ramps, there has been studies shown that when ramps are predated and they're thinned and they're moved around, they actually grow and multiply. So unless you're out there doing the work and seeing the real impact, it's easy to just believe what other people say. Even what I say, you know, if you like something I say, feel free to look it up and like validate it for yourself. I encourage you to do that. So I used to feel like I'm gatekeeping with herbalism, and taking such a dicey situation because somebody's always going to overharvest or somebody's always going to come back to the spot that you showed them and gather them. But guess what? Everybody that's getting into this, they've all done that at some point. And it's not saying that it's right, but when you're getting into things, it's easy to be like excited. So by taking a step backwards before gathering all those things up, it's great to just have gratitude and have gratitude for the life. Think about it. They are alive. You know, plants are givers by nature. It's really important that we give back as well. And maybe that's just being in reverence and taking the time away from your busy lifestyle to just be into nature. That is a huge gift that a lot of people don't even give themselves. And that's the first step of the medicine, is taking yourself away from the mundane and rewarding yourself by stepping into nature. And there's some ways that people give back to the land. I think it's hokey, and you may think it's hokey. First forest and not take that. Well, yeah. Hello? Can you hear that? Okay. So some things that you can do when you're giving back to the plants, you can leave a little bit of your hair. You can, if you dig up some roots or divide of plants, to give a little bit of your water, your water bottle back to help it, the roots to reintegrate. Some people, even as they're walking, they like spit, not to be rude, but just to give back their DNA as an exchange. That is Sophia Rose. She's my favorite herbalist. Also, songs. Rosemary Gladstar taught me to sing to the plants, because everybody has heard since they were a little child that plants like it when you talk to them, right? And could it be the carbon dioxide? Or could it be that they're sentient? Also prayers. When I was a little girl, like I heard, every time you pick a leaf from a tree, like you should say thank you or ask for permission. And I did that, and I did that for years, and I always felt so good. But it gets a little insane. You're like going around everywhere if you're really going to be hardcore foraging. But just being in a place and being thankful, I feel like that's enough. And just allowing yourself to be present is a big gift to the land. And if you want to read more about that, Braiding Sweetgrass is an amazing book. I have it linked to the back if anybody's read that. Yeah, she's a moss scientist. She's really great. First Nations. So this is also a Sam Thayer thing to leave no trace than to not leave a trace. Because backpackers, there's things that's like we should leave no trace. But if we leave no trace when we're foraging, we hide, put the leaves back, make sure we don't break any twigs, hide our tracks. Then the next person that comes there, they might not know that you've gathered 10% of, the Solomon seal. And then the next person comes back and they gather 10%. And it's just something to look for. So if that is there, maybe you could just go down the walk a little bit. You don't need to forage in that exact same spot that you see some evidence of somebody else being there. Also, that might not all be for you. There are animals out there that want those berries too, that rely on these things. So just definitely thinking about greed. Yes.
Good piece of advice. Don't take the first instance that you were told.
I love that.
Go on until you reach the piece of the second one. Know that it's good.
I feel that. I was chaga hunting with somebody in down south, and they brought me to maybe the 5th example, and they're like, okay, I can give you I think we can get one. So thank you for sharing that, Tom. The Iroquois nations also have the teaching of the 7 generations. So that's saying what you're doing to that stand is going to impact 7 generations from now. And wow, have modern people completely blown that thing out of the water. Nobody's caring what 7 generations. Maybe that toilet paper brand, but really, what are they really going there? And by planting food forests, we can actually do that. We can actually provide for 7 generations from now. So, gathering what you can process and store and use in the next coming days, weeks, and years. People hear all the time, well, I do not want to eat processed foods. Like, oh, processed foods. But if you've ever eaten wild foods, it is so much processing. It's like days and weeks and really serious processing. So know that when you go out and you gather things, you're going to be tired. And you have somewhere to put that is going to stay good overnight or tomorrow? You have to go back to work? That's something to think about. Storage. And get your new walk-in cooler downstairs. Okay, so asking permission. And so that's also slowing down and asking yourself if you really need that. Like, it does look good. I do want to eat all those fiddlehead ferns, but am I the only one in my family that's going to eat them all? And I gathered 7 pounds. Have you ever eaten 4 bowls of... They make you sick. So moderation is key. So it's good. So when you start, it's really, really easy to get excited. So let's start just gradually adding things in. And if you encounter, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, but if you encounter something rare or endangered, please just let that be and let it flourish. Even come back. Maybe that's something that you come back and offer coins to, or or offer your prayers to. You come back to that one because it's really special. And if you heard of, we call it poison ivy, but it's also guardian ivy because when it pops up, it's really good at protecting the land from people. So know that. And you might also have something similar, like if you want to start collecting herbs, you might already have something that's really similar to that. So just knowing what you have on hand and not just feeling like you need to have every single thing out there in the woods. Also, trespassing. If anybody's a morel hunter out there or mushroom hunter, they know that all of the good mushrooms are right behind the no trespassing signs. Like always. That's why they're there. So you can get in trouble for it. So I think maybe this is the picture. Oh, this picture right here, this mushroom. I'll go back. But that's at my neighbor's house. And I was riding with my aunt, this huge truck. And I'm like, just pull over. And I jump out with my basket and my knife and just start, collecting these wine cap mushrooms. And nobody is ever out in this neighborhood. And I hear, hey, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay, that's a fun time. And this neighbor was so upset with me. And he was like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm just getting these mushrooms right here, these wine cap mushrooms. And the man's wife was like, oh, I thought those were poisonous. And I'm like, no, these are actually choice edible mushrooms. These are so delicious. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. And I was like, well, what did you think I was gathering? And he's like, those dogwood blossoms. And we look over and they were just sorry, like withered things. And we just, we chuckled. And now we're friends, right? So we had an exchange. And that was just in town. But if you trespass other places, some people do, carry a little bit more heat than, hey, you know. So, and it's kind of a skeevy feeling. I feel like sometimes, like my neighbor said they were walking by my house, like looking for morels. And I was like, oh, it's nice to make a rapport. And maybe you're not gathering them, but maybe they're having a friend come over. And maybe that friend or that grandkid is expecting to get those hickory nuts and you just gathered them all, which also happened to me at Tiller's. So, I'm used to walking around. This is nice. So, so I had also, the first time I ever encountered ramps at the farmer's market, I was a little bitty baby forager, and I said, wow, like, how did you pick those? And Chanterelle said, it's a woman named Chanterelle, she goes, carefully. And I never forgot that saying because she didn't say more. She did, and I was just like, you know what? I respect that you did. That means that you took heed. So I always remember that saying. I also feel like we are all hardwired to do this. Like every person that goes to the grocery store or the supermarket or anything, we go and we forage there and we're looking for things and we're finding the best deals. That means time. That means saving. That means like what's on the menu. What all of this stuff is like imprinted into our body. And I think, everybody's always like, I got this slamming deal. And it's just like the feeling that you get when you find that smoking deal. That's like when our ancestors used to go and they found just like this biggest patch of huckleberries. It's like those feelings are just inside of us all. And so it's fun to like tap into that when you go out into the woods and just feel that like bloom inside of you and the pure joy it is when you meet a new plant that you've been wanting to meet. And also when it's like, it's willing to give itself to you as well. I also feel like there is some room here to work on shopping addiction with foraging. So if anybody out there does OT or wants to talk about that, I'd love to team up. So when is also a good thing to know when we're foraging. So like following the cyclical nature of wild plants is really like an awesome way to not think in Western ways. Like now I think like, oh, I always have dinner with my friend Larissa when the ramps are up. I haven't talked to her because of winter time, but I know that person. I'm going to reconnect with them. Or like my husband and I, our anniversary is when the raspberries are ripe. Like I don't have to think about what the date is. That's just how we connect. So that's really fun to have that sort of background connection with the plants in the cycles. And just eating with the seasons is really important. So it's like back when like we were only eating like say wild blueberries and we had like hunks of them. So we're not just like eating a couple blueberries here and there every day throughout the year, like to get all these polyphenols and all of these like vitamins in our body. It's in a huge portion, in a huge chunk for a large period of time. So our body can actually absorb them and actually get those greens in the springtime. Not just, well, I guess we can get spring mix salad because it's there 365 in the grocery store, right? Our bodies don't really crave iceberg lettuce in the middle of the winter, So just giving yourself permission to not feel like you need to nosh on a salad in the middle of winter because maybe your body really doesn't want that. And we have climate control now, 365 too. It's always 70 degrees in our houses. And so we just don't have that innate need to be as connected, but it's really, really great when we can be. It's also foraging will help you get into connection of the transition of the seasons. Like say you are starting to gather maple sap. Like I tap my 2 maple trees in the middle of town with my kids for years. We get a few pints, do a few quarts, but like we do it every year, and you wouldn't believe how much work it is. Just 2 trees in the middle of town. It's like so much work. It's crazy. And if I didn't do that, I might still be inside my house late February, beginning of March. I wouldn't be starting to feel the sun on my body, get my kids out and get the acclimation, because we all know about hardening off plants. But if we don't get out there in that change of season, if we don't slowly start to build up the tolerance, by the time it's summertime and spring, we're too hot. We just need to go inside and get air conditioning. I'm not above it. But it's the same with the cold. But I'm just saying, by connecting with the wild foods, you have a purpose to get outside at those times and to find these new things. And then to get yourself on that hike that maybe you didn't want to go on, but if you want to see what's going on and check on your plants and your stands, and it's a good excuse to get out there. So that's also like keeping an eye on plants at different times of the year, because it's really easy like to see the elderberry in flower, and elderberry flower is super delicious. So as soon as those blooms die back, they just recede into the green curtain, and you will completely forget where that stand is. So by going out and seeing the mushroom remnants from year to year, oh, that's where the turkey tails are. I can maybe come back when they're ready to go. A great thing to do is, if you're a pencil and paper person, is to write down the coordinates and where you are and how you got there. But if you do have an iPhone or some sort of smartphone, it's crucial that you drop your pin where you are. I couldn't tell you how many times I have been able to find that elderberry patch when I was canoeing, or that place that I would have never been able to find again unless I had my GPS coordinate. And it just shows up as a little red dot, but it's a great tip. Also, people keep journals too, so you can see like what that patch is doing from year to year. Like if I learned this from Jim McDonald, if I'm going to gather Solomon seal from somewhere, I'm not going to go back there for 8 years. That's also a wild rice thought too. Roger Labine is the rice chief of Michigan, and he tells people where and when they can go gather the rice. And if that's been, he doesn't want people to go back for like a good chunk of time to that same patch, just in order to sustain it. So you can do that too. I have definitely even though nettle isn't like a native plant, I have gone and I have seen my impact on nettle. So just being aware of your impact is huge. So where this one I'm gathering St. John's wort, and this is in the northern Michigan, and wow, there's a lot of St. John's wort in Michigan. And this is wintergreen berries over there. And there's been places where, on this island called Bois Blanc Island in the Straits. And that's a great place if anybody has never been there. And, I just was at the airport. I was like, gathering one little yarrow here and like one little thing there. And then I come back the next day and it's completely mowed. Just mowed. Everything. And I'm like, well, now I know if I go and maybe like, since it's such a tiny community, I can call the airport and say, hey, that might not be the best place for some people too, because there could be chemtrails, but that's the thing, is being part of that place and seeing what happens there, and then you can get ahead of it. So private land is the best place. And also to say, if you are worried about planting something that's endangered into your property or another property and have that being protected, and it's not. So at that point, Tyler Bassett told me, if you transplant any plant into your property, even though it's endangered, then it technically is just a pet then. So it doesn't have like rights. So you can have your patch and just go at it. So I'm sure Chad from Hidden Savannah has to make your wildest dreams of your your plants. So private land, state game areas, you do have permission to gather berries and mushrooms from state game areas. And I was gathering from there recently with my baby, and I'm just like down in the brush, and I'm like, oh, it's turkey season. And I'm like just out here by myself with my kid, not wearing orange. So backpack, maybe a scarf, a bandana, something like that would behoove you if you're out in the boonies. City parks, also somewhere to gather from. You're going to start seeing all these plants that you want to forage everywhere. And really, it's your own decision. It's your discernment. There is a lot of gray area in foraging. And I'm going to say you should just err on the side of caution. But know that, like, I loved seeing, like, all of the Muslim grandmas just grabbing, like, all of the grape leaves in the parking lots of the stores. Like, nobody's going to tell them no. Nobody's going to eat those grape leaves. And if you really know how grapes work, they need to be thinned anyways in order to produce lots of grapes. So you could be doing the plants a service as well. So you got to learn the local rules. And they do spray in parks too. A lot do. So it's good to know what your park is. And that's, again, making relationship with the space. So keeping an eye on this, we talked about that, on how it's doing from year to year. And to know, like, how that plant is reproducing. Is that a perennial? Is that only seed? Is the plant only reproducing by seed? Then you have to have a lot more accountability on yourself on what you're gathering. I also like to choose from stands that are vibrant. And a huge thing is contaminants. So I talked about the food systems just being completely contaminated too. But the wild and the plants in town definitely can be. Lead is a real thing to worry about. If you are using water extractions, lead does, and heavy metals do leach into water extractions, and obviously if you eat it. But if you're making like a tincture and alcohol extraction, the lead does not go into it. And also, if you're gathering it for yourself, then it's your choice. But if you're going to sell it or give it to other people, you really want to make sure you're gathering somewhere clean, not off the roadside. It's really generally like 50 feet from the roads, but like all of the roads have had, like, since the 50s, like tons of lead contamination and gasoline and things like that. So lead is heavy and it stays. Also the pre-salt, that's what's nasty before they put the actual salt on it. And soon when you start identifying plants that you want to eat on the way to South Haven and things, like, you're just going to see them in all of the wayside, next to all the agricultural fields, everywhere, because plants travel with humans. And you think about the way, like, fruits, the old markets, and how there'd be fruit trees all along the trail because people would take their plums and they'd eat their plum and then they'd throw it as they walk. And all of a sudden now, oh, there's free fruit. So you'll see there's chicory and all the elder and everything. Especially dandelion. That's the one thing that's really hard to find that's, like, not contaminated. But if you come out to Tillers, we can pick. Crazy. So that's something to be also positively identifying what you're doing. I know this is a lot of talking right now, but you don't want to smoke it, rub it on yourself, make a bolster, like make an eye cream, like unless you really know what it is. I don't want to sound like fearful right now, but it's like the accidents always happen closest to home because we're complacent. And by knowing, like, the poisons in the area, we won't be bombarded and blindsided by them. And Jim McDonald has seen water hemlock, which only grows in the Apiaceae family, only grows in the water. With Queen Anne's lace, who looks really similar, only grows in dry, and they were crossed. And if you're just going to grab things up and not look, really, you could, everything's edible once, right? It's like I have, in the beginning of my herbalism, I had somebody asked me to give them Queen Anne's lace. I gave them Queen Anne's lace. That person worked themselves up and thought that they were getting heart palpitations. They were getting sweating. They were getting all all of these symptoms that would be like poison hemlock symptoms, but they were just really fearful and they were giving themselves that. I was done. I was like, I am not going to give anybody wild food. I'm not an herbalist. Like, I'm so over this. And that was something that I had gathered that plant for years, right? So you just don't want to be complacent. You want to know what you're doing. And when in doubt, key it out. And I am not a botanist, but it's great to have some books and have some just basic facts on how to go backwards from, say you have like a rose or a prickle, just to know how to go through those books. You can also take a picture. I always get the question, like, do you like those apps? Those ID apps? And I'll tell you, no. I'm like, those answers are way crazy. But I was trying to ID a plant in my garden for like 2 years, and somebody used the app and we're like, oh, that's chervil. And I was like, oh, okay, that app was helpful, I guess. So, take it with a grain of salt and double check, okay? So it's a good start. And also you can gather, like, because sometimes you're in the middle of nowhere and you won't have the internet on your phone, or you're like 20 pounds of like books with you. So you can take a picture of that plant and then drop where your coordinates are and come back to that if it's something that you really are interested in. Or maybe you're like, oh, maybe this is ginseng. You're not going to like pull up your ginseng plant and like carry it home. Whoops, could have extra jack in the pulpit. Whoops, So, or vice versa. And also, everybody's always like, where do I find morels, or where do I find this plant? And it's good to get yourself like familiar on finding the habitats of plants and not necessarily exactly the location of where that person has found them. Because a lot of people don't like to share where they found things, or some people are very, I'm mostly very giving with my spots, but it's just great to try to figure out what the habitats are so you can find your own places. So we're going to get into some what we should have. So tree sugar and nuts. So these are like just easy ways I want to encourage people to just bring more wild foods into their diet without trying to like be completely revolutionary with themselves. So you can just sub out things too. Like, you don't have to have like turbinado, like wild sugar. You can use maple sugar. I know it's expensive, or maple syrup, but honey doesn't even, there's all these recipes for honey, but honey doesn't even really give that sweet of a flavor, I think, in foods. So by encouraging, the agricultural dollars and small farmers that are doing maple syrup, it's really great. Like, you can get some affordable, so just maybe even just changing your sugar intake or gifting it to people as well for the holidays. Maybe you want to give somebody maple syrup instead of some sort of weird thing that they're not going to like as a present. It's always a good present. So you can also use walnut. I've tried to do it. It didn't work for me, but one of my students gave me walnut syrup, and it was like the most delicious thing I've ever had. Birch. Has anybody ever tried birch water, like birch beer? So the natives, birch syrup is so good. Yes. Yeah, and it's not white birch. So, the yellow birch. So that's the flavor missing on all your root beer, by the way. If you ever have a chance to go find root beer and you see that there's birch in it, or that's the best flavor. Also, this was the real first agricultural product of this region, is maple sugar and maple syrup. Also, you can eat the maple seeds. You can toast them, like the whirligigs. Yeah, you got to peel them. I did that as a kid. I remember just peeling them all. Yeah, you toast them up. So, also nuts. Beech nuts are one of the oldest foods they've ever found on the archaeological record. So, beech nuts, hickory, walnut, acorns. Sam Thayer, I have the empty bottle back there, but Sam Thayer, he's the world authority of food. He's actually from Michigan. He lives in Wisconsin. If anybody can learn one thing, it's like you need to figure out how to get more information from Sam Thayer. So he has revived hickory nut and acorn nut oil. It hasn't really been produced in about 200 years, but he sells it affordably, and it is amazing as a cooking oil. So olive oil, yes, it's very cheap and it's very versatile, but it's not from here. It's from really far away. So by using these nuts, we can think about the future of what's here and not relying on an intensely global market. It's nearly impossible, but the small things and each meal matters. So I just did the grapes here because it was on the flyer. So wild grapes are everywhere. Like, it's just like vine land pretty much in this region. So you can pickle them for grape leaves. You can make wine with our native grapes. You can make soda. You can eat the grapes fresh. And you can also eat the green tendrils as a trail snack. Now, I'm not going to go over everything like that for the other plants because we're kind of going over. But this is just a list of plants that I thought that everybody here might know or might peripherally know that they could work into their diets. And I could email this to people, or if you need this information. So, who has eaten wild rice here? Okay. I hope everybody can do it by the end of the year. Okay? It's delicious. It's a really serious way to encourage local economies for the native tribes here. And you could also get into the there's a wild rice initiative, and if you're really interested, you can help with the planting in the fall. And it's super cool. So wild rice, you can buy it online everywhere too. So spice bush, the berries, if you've never had spice bush, lindera, it's absolutely out of this world flavor. Oh my gosh, so good. Grind them up, put them in syrups, I've been wanting to put them in a grinder. That's my goal of this year. Just like, yeah, so good. Like, just crazy flavor. So raspberries, all types of raspberries, the berries and the leaves. And most women probably have heard like red raspberry leaf, for all these events. We don't need red raspberry leaf. You can have black cap raspberry, blackberry leaves. They're just slightly more astringent, but I just pick out because those things just go crazy. They're invasive. Cut down some old mature forest, and what comes up? The berries. So Mayapples. Does everybody have a Mayapple fruit before? The best. Yes, there's one. Yeah. Absolutely the most long game you can play. The deer, the animals, they will get there. They will get there way before you do. But if you can like find one, maybe like trap it under a basket or something that like the flies can get in, it's absolutely, I'm like drooling thinking about it because it tastes just, you think pawpaws are tropical? Like they are like look, smell, and taste just like a guava. It's crazy. Yeah, it's like early September. But you got to keep your eyes on the prize though, because they will be gone. I know. Oh yeah, no, they're flowering right now. So May apples are flowering right now. Yeah, and the whole plant is toxic, and the seeds can be toxic, and the skin. If you eat too much, you could have GI. It could be an emetic. So you don't. I've ate the seeds, and they didn't bother me, but no, it's just like a fruit. It is so going to blow your mind. I hope everybody here, next time I see you, you can tell me you've had at least one more thing off this list. So knotweed. Also, I don't have in my notes, but eating invasives, it's also just, I don't know how I completely missed that, but that's like one of the best things you can do as a steward of your land is eat all those invasives. Eat them up. Garlic, you can only eat, as Lisa Rose said, my family can only eat so much garlic mustard pesto. Okay. But you can, I haven't done it, but I've been wanting to make like horseradish from the roots. People say? People say, yeah. And there's lots of those, right? But the thing is, with garlic mustard, we pick and 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 pick, and guess what? What is it like? Disturbed soil. I just cut up lots of trees and bulldozed a bunch of stuff at my new property. Guess what's everywhere? Garlic mustard seeds. And you can also eat the microgreens. They are delicious too. Very good. Eat those. Just put them on your salad. around your sandwiches and everything. So Japanese knotweed, you can use the young shoots just like rhubarb. So I tried to eat my whole patch down and see what happens. I ate almost every single one, and yes, a lot did come back, but then I had another flush. So I'm not going to get too into all of these, but garlic mustard, Japanese knotweed is really great for rhubarb substitute. Cattails, you can eat just like year round, really. I remember reading a book when I was little that said, like, if everybody made flour out of cattails, we could like end starvation. It's a lot of work. But the immature flower spikes of cattails, like when they're teeny tiny, it's like a hot dog on a stick, like a corn dog. Oh, when you have them steamed, they're so good. They're pickled. You can use the shoots. You can use the rootlets when coming out the side. You can use the pollen. People wash the roots and use the starch as well. There's a lot to cattails have a lot to offer. And does anybody know where Three Lakes is? That there's a lot of cattails there. There's like hundreds of thousands of them. It's crazy. Nobody's there. Dandelions, you can eat the whole plant. I know everybody knows about dandelion, but literally it's the bane of everybody's existence, but it's also like the most nutritious and delicious plant that you can ever have. And if you are worried about eating wild salads, you know, you hear like, oh, you can eat like cleavage, you can eat chickweed, you can eat like all these crazy things in the springtime, but they're like choky, not really the best texture. If you massage them, like a kale, like look up a massage kale salad recipe and just put that for wild greens. That's like my claim to fame in the wild food. And I started massaging my wild salads. I'm drooling. So autumn olives, that's a nasty invasive, absolutely crazy high in lycopene, absolutely most delicious flavor. If you're not eating autumn olives, you're missing out. It's also illegal to like have invasive plants. I just looked it up in like the Michigan. I was looking up like foraging permits and things like that. And it said it's illegal to obtain invasive plants. I almost didn't say that out loud. But if you're eating them, if you just eat them, I don't know if that's obtaining them, right? You're just eating them. So, so nettle is, if you could have one plant, I think, to do it all, and for nutritional needs, I would say nettle. You can never have enough nettle. And this time of year, it's already like this big, but towards the end of fall, they'll fall down again, and then there'll be more babies that pop up. And what I like to do is I have wild plants in my yard, and I call them my indicators. And I'm like, oh, the nettle's this big. I can go up and get nettle. I kind of just see what my May apples are doing. And it's just a good way to see like what the region's doing by having your pet. And if you're not a good gardener, foraging is really an awesome way to like work that kink out. And milkweed. Is anybody eating milkweed here? Not a one? Yeah. What do you eat? What part do you eat? The pods, yes. Like if you the florets, like before they have opened you can eat the flowers as well too, but they're delicious. Like absolutely yummy. You can just substitute that for like literally any plant, and the small shoots as well. You do maybe want to blanch those. And there is something that people are saying, well, what about the flower? What about the monarchs? What about these patches, you know? But by like tending these patches, people will have like better passions for them, and they will take better care of them. And when you pick them more, they proliferate. And you can also eat the small pods, the immature seed pods, if they're no longer than 2 inches of milkweeds. And there's so many milkweeds, and it's so. If you ever blew some milkweeds down, you just start like huge patches of them. So keep your eyes on those this year too. So catching wild yeasts are awesome too. Service berries and cut leaf coneflowers, sochin. Those are amazing greens too. And you all might have some of this in your yard. So catching wild yeast. Do I have more time here? I have. We're over time? Okay, I know. Okay. I have some raspberries in the back that I brought, and I want to give you a little bit of that if you want to use the yeast on there. But wild raspberry canes are just the best source of yeast, wild yeast in the whole. And I have a recipe right here on how to catch a wild yeast. And just put 1 part water, 1 part flour, cover it with a cheesecloth, and just put it outside for a few days. And then you can have your. Everybody did this up until like we had yeast, right? So all of our ancestors did this until very recently. And people could be allergic to bread, but yes, they could actually be allergic to the genetically modified yeast. People don't get allergic when they go to Europe because they don't have that kind of crazy yeast there in some things. Also, you can, when you're camping, next time you go camping, just make your slurry, put in your raspberry, and then you have and don't put the egg or anything in, just the water and the flour. And then 2 days, you'll have your perfect fermented pancakes. And it tastes just like raspberries. I'm drooling again because it's so good. Food forests, permaculture, relying on indigenous knowledge, having food sovereignty, and really, really thinking about global issues and using regional solutions. So that's eating what's in our region. That's like helping control invasives. That's encouraging your like guerrilla gardening of your area. Okay. And can I really quick just draw what it would be like if you had the chance maybe to create your own food forest and what plants would be great for this area to grow. Anybody?
Sure. And then while you're doing that, and if you can take the mic with you if you're going to be talking, but and then we'll open it up to questions. And I've got this microphone, and I'll bring it over to you so that everyone can hear your question too.
Does anybody want to just shout out some like trees, some canopied things that they would like to have in the top of their black? Yep. Anybody else? Yes. You got to get those acorns. You wouldn't believe how much food you can get off an acorn. I'm going to say hickory, because if you've never had hickory nut milk, which is a huge main stage of native diets, was the milk from hickory nuts. Sam Thayer made it. It tasted like banana bread. It's crazy. Cherry? Yeah, black cherry. I'm going to put choke there too. How about plums? Sorry, my handwriting. Maple, yeah. I do a lot with cedar. People used to use that for vitamin C. It has a lot of vitamin C in it. I make a lot of soap with cedar. If you've ever made soap, it makes... Yep. A lot of tannins. So chestnut. I know a lot of them are dead now. But there is one American chestnut at Tiller's. Yep. Filberts. Oh, yeah. Walnut. So much you can do with the walnut. Butternut. More butternut. Let's bring that back. We use it all for furniture. Okay. I can make a better version of this too if anybody wants me to put it on the email. Okay, so how about the understory? Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Yes. Oh my, that is a good one. So a lot of these things we think about planting them for the habitat, for pollinators, for animals and things, but we are animals and we deserve to eat this stuff too. We really do. So elder. Is hazel this one? Understory, you think? Or is it? Okay. Oh, yeah. Who could forget that? Apple? Is that top, though? Oh, I had crab apple. Crab apple. Yum. Also, hawthorn. Is that a native to here? Do we have any hawthorns native? Oh, yeah, yum, mulberry. How do we forget that? Now we got to have a potluck after this. Persimmon? Yum. Who's had a persimmon? A good one. Okay, I want to see. I think I had a persimmon and a pawpaw for the first time. This wild man who was just trapped. And it really, I think it changed my life. Just a rotten old persimmon and nothing more flavorful. Okay, so we're going to move on to the bottom. So if we have a chance to plant these things, they could really impact 7 generations from now. Or if we had that, if we were forcibly moved from our land, like the people were in the Salish nations, then this would still be thriving. This wouldn't need us. It would still be going. So I'm going to put ramps. Strawberries. Mm-hmm. I'm putting wild ginger down here too. And medicinal roots, because there's a lot of those. Oh, yes. I don't know if I told you, but the plant of my apple is toxic, so don't eat the plant. And then, oh yes, that's the most calories, really, right there. So mushrooms, I'm also putting down here. And berries. Does anybody know about where there is wild huckleberries around here still? They were all kind of ripped out for South Haven. That's where they all grew right here. And Chicago, the word for Chicago is actually stinky onion, which is like the land of the wild leek. Who says wild leek? Some people? Okay. And then I'm going to put herbs. And gooseberries. So many berries. So I just want you to consider maybe, or if you or somebody that maybe you're going to consult a new member or somebody that's interested in wild plants and maybe shift them to something that's edible. I want that to be like the major takeaway here is like when we're planting new things and for ourselves, let's plant things that we can also eat and is habitat for the native inhabitants of the land as well. I know, that's the elderberry right there. And sometimes, not all plants, but like that's one that I like to pick just slightly underripe so that I have them.
All right. Thank you very much, Brenna. Let's give Brenna a big thank you. I think we're all going to be looking a little more closely when we go out for that walk next time. Maybe, do we have time for a question or two? Is anyone with a burning question? Yes.
Oh,
Resources, yeah.
So I have Sam Thayer here, his website, Great Lakes Foraging Gathering. Anybody go there? I'm teaching there. It's the most fun place ever. The tickets sell out like immediately, but it's a really amazing place to just deeply immerse yourself in wild food. We eat all wild food. There's wild potluck. Like, we're going out and foraging all this food and then eating it for the meals. Sam Thayer also has a foraging gathering. It's in Wisconsin in September, mid-September. And Rachel's, so her brand is Will Forage for Food. Her name's Rachel Milfsted, and she's a biology professor at U of M. But that's her gathering. And she also teaches a lot of other foraging classes. And her brand is Will Forage for Food. So Rice Chief Roger Labine is really cool. I linked a presentation a slideshow that's really good there. I put a Facebook page if you want to be part of that group. There's a lot of wild food business going on there. Everybody's like saying what's in season right now, all the weird syrups and things that they're making. The book Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Wall Kimmerer I was talking about. And there's a link to see some permits for the USDA for foraging, because that's like a gray area as well, and you can get certain permits. So.
And Brenna brought some of her books. They're on the table at the back there too, if you want to have a quick look at those.
And also you can find me online on Facebook or Instagram or you can email me as well.
Your talk reminded me of a story. I'll make it short. It's an Anishinaabe story. And human beings were out of control. They were just using up all the resources and not showing gratitude to the animals or the birds or the fish or the plants. The animals all got together and they said, "This is too much. We're just holding back. We're not going to give ourselves anymore." And the birds got together and they said, "This is too much. These ungrateful people, we're not going to give ourselves anymore. We're going to go away." And the fish said the same thing. And then the plants got together and they said, we can't do this. They really can't live without us. And so we'll go on. We'll keep giving ourselves. And so we're still here.
Plants are the ultimate giver. Thank you.
Thank you.
We don't need the meat. No. We can do all the plants.
I think with that, maybe Brenna will stay around for a little bit. People have more questions. And before we break up, I just want to announce, too, that there's a photo exhibit upstairs just as you come in. It's a pollinator photo exhibit by our own Quinn Edwards here. So, that's going to be up there up through June, right? Yeah, and Pollinator Week's third week in June, and there'll be an artist reception at that time. So you'll see something about that in the British District Library news. Thank you so much, Brenna. Thank you all for coming. And we'll have information on her field trip that she'll be leading at Asylum Lake in the newsletter, but that's June 17th, Saturday, June 17th, 10 to noon. And she'll be pointing out some plants that you can forage. Parkview parking lot at Asylum Lake. All right. Thank you.
Bring water.